God knows.
All right, so we are live. Welcome everyone, and thank you GMAT Club. I think it's great for us to partner with the GMAT Club once more at this crucial time of the year for MBA applications. While I think let's give a couple of seconds for everyone to kind of trickle in, and I'm joined by my colleague Natasha. So I think Natasha is going to just kick off, the presentation on a strong note. And do keep this very interactive. I think we would love to hear from where you guys are joining. And if you have any questions, keep them coming in the chat box. We will take all the questions at the end. But let's keep it interactive. So let us know where you're joining from, what uh, part of the MBA application journey you are, and we hope to kind of make it as interactive as possible. Over to
And
you,
do
Nata.
let us know, yeah, do let us know if you're planning to apply in round two, and keep those questions coming. So, like Preeti said, we'll keep the conversation interactive. We will have a dedicated question and answer session, but it's great to see comments. We can pick those up. All right. I think today what we want to talk about, and I'm going to introduce what we're speaking about, is really talking about round two and applying to an MBA program in round two as the beginning of just creating a comprehensive strategy that will help you maximize the time between now and application deadlines. So, without further ado, let me just introduce Preeti and myself. So, Preeti heads MBA admissions as a service line at the Red Pen, and I oversee client servicing for MBA applicants at the Red Pen. Between the two of us, we have, worked with, I guess, thousands of clients, typically those applying to M7 schools in the US, and of course, premier global institutions as well. So we have a lot of experience dealing with the nerves that come with round two. So we're going to give you the benefit of our experience in today's session. I think one of the primary questions that we need to talk about is, if you have been thinking about round one versus round two, and you weren't able to put in your applications in round one, it's very natural to wonder why you would have a strong application in round two. And there are a couple of things that you need to realize work in your favor if you've been thinking about applying since maybe the start of the year, and now you wonder whether round two is right. You've had the chance to really work on your test scores. You've perhaps given the test, a number of times, and you would have realized that you now have a score that really works for you. You've also had an opportunity to think and reflect on your professional journey, which also means that you've had opportunities to think about how you want to deepen your engagement at work. While you're working on your resume, you may have realized that there are projects you could volunteer for, there could be other initiatives that you'd want to take up, and you've had the time to really work on those and be in a position, hopefully, where you can show a few results around that. You've deepened your school research. Perhaps there were people who are not available to speak to you in time for round one deadlines, but you've had the time since then to deepen your engagement with schools and with student ambassadors, and understand the schools that you're interested in and you're fundamentally looking at as your dream schools. Extracurricular activities, if you've not had the time to think about the ones that you want to showcase in round one, now is a good time to really think about what you've done since then to make those experiences meaningful to you. And finally, you may have also invested some time in doing a few additional certifications, virtual courses, and these are things that schools do value because they demonstrate that you are someone who's committed to learning, to continuous improvement. So these are also huge value additions to your profile that you would want to mention in your round two application. So with that, I think Preeti, it's a good time to now talk about what goes into a round two strategy.
Right. So I think this is an overall timeline and a strategy for the next 2 months, October and November, I would say. October is, I think, almost done. So maybe let's talk about November and December. So finalize the list of schools. And while we've said that, strategize the next 2 months, I would just do that in the month of October. Okay. And then use November and December to kind of, just use more of, just deepening the school research, and networking with alums, and admissions, attending admissions events, and deepening your school research, reflecting on your work profile. So overall, I think, let me just step back. So while this chart is on the screen, first step first, the first document that any adcom will pick up in your application set is going to be your resume. Okay, so accelerate your work experience. You can take a screenshot of the slide in terms of the timelines, but what I would like to talk about is things which are not on the slide, which is like, look at your resume if it is really strong enough. I've said this time and again that a good way to kind of assess where you are in your professional profile when it comes to competing at highly competitive business schools is to understand where you stand when compared with your peer group, right? If your peer group, for example, is you are like average, you get that rating of meets expectations, for example, then then that's not enough. Then you're probably going to be that average applicant even in the entire applicant pool. So usually always try to look at um, okay, where's the presentation? Did we just lose it? No problem. I still know the points, so I think we can just cover the points in this. So I think please look at your professional work profile and strengthening your resume. If there's an opportunity to kind of work with your manager, your direct supervisor, and get more meaty projects where you are able to showcase more scale, scope, and impact, take up leadership responsibilities, and apply yourself in diverse ways to kind of showcase a strong candidature via your resume. This is the time to do it. Okay, this, as we're talking, it's October 15th, so I think this is the time that you should do that. The next thing is, what we can do is, we should look at finalizing your recommenders. While I think the timeline mentioned LORs at a later stage, this is a time when I think we need to kind of talk about having that conversation with recommenders, having the conversation with your who the recommender should be, and getting your pointers ready. What are the kind of personal and professional stories that you would want the recommenders to kind of speak about, depending on what are the kind of recommenders that you're choosing, right? If you're not choosing a recommender who's your immediate direct supervisor, many schools require you to submit an option, let's say, explaining why. All right. um all right. Natasha is waiting to join backstage. So I think GMAT Club folks, can you just admit her in? All right. I think I'll just keep going. Um, the other point is about finalizing the list of schools. This is a time when you should look through the list of schools that you want to apply and really sit and reflect through multiple points as to which school should you apply, and what is the list of your dream target and safety schools. This is also a time to kind of understand which are the schools that you applied in round one, what has worked, what has not worked, and re-strategize for round two if you are not the first time applicant for round two. If you are a reapplicant, know that reapplicants are looked upon quite favorably by business schools. So do not kind of think that I'm a reapplicant and I need to kind of. So I think it's a good time if you're a reapplicant and you're kind of just stepping back and re-strategizing your story and understanding key pieces of the MBA application. Why an MBA? Why now? Why so and so school? How do I contribute to so and so school's community? That is very important. Also, when you are doing the the school research, always understand that you also have to understand how you can contribute to a school. MBA is an expensive investment of time and money. So make sure your research also kind of stacks up. Maintain a Google sheet, a Excel file, a Word document, whatever it is. and do mention, do take detailed notes. uh, Whenever you make the list of schools, scan their websites, their YouTube channels, their their social media channels for important announcements. Speak to alumni, speak to current students, speak with admissions folk whenever you have an opportunity to participate in virtual admissions events, if you're not going to school, that is. And maintain meticulous notes. Do not rely on memory. Memory is very fickle, and it can sort of you may think that you sort of know what is going on, but you will maintaining meticulous notes through school research helps you when you're putting pen to paper finally. All right. um I think school research we covered resume, we covered letters of recommendation. um, yeah, transcripts and documents, this will be an important part when it comes to your application. So make sure you have your transcripts handy and ready. Many a times these are documents which are important and people are scrambling at the last moment. There's one more point I want to kind of talk a little bit about, and that is the application form. At the red pen, I think we totally do that upfront. Review the application form of any school. What happens is usually everyone is just busy what writing their, everyone wants to just jump in writing essays, but that is not a good strategy. What you should also look at is the application form of a particular school, and that may have certain key requirements and criteria which for which you may need to arrange for, or work through your application. For example, Columbia Business School's application form asks you, what have you attended any events, have you spoken to any alumni, and who are they? So you need to be able to write that. If you're going to be filling out your application form just on the cusp of the deadline, then you just lost the plot, right? So make sure you review the application form for these schools. And and just coming back to finalizing the list of schools, it is very important to understand how a certain set of schools fit your professional and personal profile, and vice versa. So give it that time. If you're starting this right now, and this is really not a sales pitch, but please take help of some consultant. If you are like just starting everything right now and you're like, okay, let me just apply to these three schools because all of my colleagues in the past have gone there, or my friends have gone there, or stuff like that, right? So these are, I think, some of the most important points. Essays, I think we have a whole different a strategy and tip on the essay part. So I think we can come to that later. But I think overall, I think at this point of time, what I would do is I would re-look at my work profile, look at my resume, have discussions with those recommenders, finalize my list of schools, put a school research document together, start putting those notes together, and yeah, I think that's I think a good start. We do have some questions coming in, and we're going to take them at the end, but do keep them coming. I am making a note of your questions, so I will be answering them at the end. All right. I think I spoke about this in the earlier slide. Sorry, the slide was not available, so I think I just kept talking on the earlier slide. But let me just kind of, so these are the focus areas which we have kind of highlighted. Profile development. Now, honestly, in 2 months, 2.5 months, I would say, because we are on October 15th. 2.5 months is a very short time for profile development. But what you can do is look at various parts of your early childhood. You can look at your high school life, you can college life, and you can your career, your university. You just have these buckets and try to identify certain stories, personal and professional stories during each time. That's not to say that you need to write stories going back to your childhood when you were like in first grade, okay? But it will give you patterns and themes about value systems, and about your skill sets, what your strengths are, certain leadership traits which are visible very early in life. So plot down some of those stories across these timelines, and you will see a pattern emerging. And those stories can then become a very foundational and, sort of a foundation for crafting business school, stories which will be important for multiple essay prompts. So I think that is one exercise I would do in terms of profile development. Resume I already spoke about. School research I spoke about briefly. Goals development, this is very important, very very important, and I think this is my favorite area because I think this is my strength as an admissions consultant. um, you are applying to a business school, right? So understanding business is very important. Why are you going to business school? You don't need to go to business school to kind of practice business, right? This is not medical or law school. So understanding how an MBA really fits into your career path is very important. At the Red Pen, I'm extremely proud to say that, when I have had conversations with our clients at the Red Pen, we have detailed discussions and multiple brainstorming internally when we are reviewing our clients' essays on just goals development. How to kind of do not have lame duck goals like I want to go into consulting. When everything else fails, let me go into when does consulting make sense? Consulting makes sense if you are coming from a non-business career, if you're from the army, from law, from medical science. You're like, okay, let me, after business school, consulting is an extension of business school in some ways. Those who are in consulting will and have been to business school will know what I'm talking about. And it is, that is your segue into the business world. So that definitely makes sense. However, just saying I want to go into consulting post MBA is not kind of going to make, sure, you can go into consulting when you actually go to business school, but that's not a very nuanced and thought about approach. Think about your career till date, think about your undergrad, think about what is it that you have done, where does this career plus an MBA really take you realistically, plus being a little bit ambitious if you're applying to a highly competitive business school. So this is very individual, very very specific, but developing your post MBA goals after the resume, I would say that is the second most important thing that you will do in your MBA application. We spoke about LORs and standardized tests. Oh my God, how can I forget that? Please get the test score out of the way. For some of us, who are not good standardized test takers, this can be a nasty surprise right on the cusp of admission deadline. So, please do not, take any chances on that. Try to get that out of the way, and it's going to be a balancing act between, if you're not taking the test, between application work, your work in the office, and taking the test. So between these three, it's going to be a juggling act. But hopefully in the month of December, when the work slows down, you'll have more time to kind of just put everything. See, putting all the material together is not that's not rocket science. That is the easiest part. The pre work which is required in terms of and knowing, how you can beef up your work profile so that the resume looks strong, having very strong and documented school research, multiple conversations, informational interviews with all these multiple parties which I spoke about, understanding your goals development, framing your personal professional stories. That is the heavy lifting which you need to do now. And you need to start early. Why? Because that thinking doesn't come overnight. You may have that moment of insight, like that eureka moment, but it may not come. So I would not lean on that. I would prepare early, and then, once you have all this material ready, then putting, pen to paper and crafting that application doesn't really take much time. Um, we spoke a bit about the application form, and I guess I will hand over to Natasha now. I guess we are talking about SE development. I think something which is
Yeah.
most important for many applicants.
Yeah, I think the third tip that we're going to speak about, of course, once you've understood the elements that you're working on and the timeline that you have in hand, it's important to understand that building an effective essay is really a process that needs to start at an earlier stage, because the most important part of building your essays and really creating an effective pitch will be reflection. And I think I'm going to start by talking about the fact that essay building needs to start with a bank of stories. Now, these bank of stories that you create need to be stories that look at various elements of your life. So apart from looking at like personal stories, stories from the from the academic world and your performance and your key experiences in college, as well as professional stories, they also need to be representative of times when you've demonstrated leadership, when you've demonstrated empathy with other individuals, where you have stories which indicate your choices and how you have taken decisions that have moved you further in your goals, as well as stories of personal growth. It's important to understand that each of these stories, while in itself may not be a very like a major moment in your life, taken together, they will reveal a lot of patterns that Preeti was speaking about. And these are patterns which typically will indicate, even to you at the time when you're writing these bank of stories down, will give you an indication of what is really important to you as a value system, what has guided your choices, what has been important when you have achieved major outcomes in your life, and also gives you a sense of what is important to you. All of these patterns will start emerging when you put in the work to create a bank of stories through reflection. Every story that you write down, whether it's personal or professional, needs to follow a star format. When you force yourself to write in a star format, you force yourself to articulate and think in a particular manner that will make sense at different stages of your application. So, whether it is putting an essay together, whether it is creating pointers for your letter of recommendation, or at a later point when you are preparing for interviews, writing stories in a format that provides first the situation or the context, then talks about the task that you had in hand, talks about the actions that you then took in those contexts with that task ahead of you, and the outcomes that you were able to achieve. And these could be immediate outcomes, which could be very number centric if it's professional, or it could be very impactful from an emotional angle if it's a personal story. But more importantly, you may also have an enduring impact that you want to talk about. In a professional story, that would mean not only what you achieved in the moment as an outcome of your actions, but what was the long range change or impact that you were able to achieve within an organization. If it's personal, it could be the long range impact that you need to think about, could be your relationships, the positivity that you were able to infuse into situations, or sometimes just the impact that you've had on other individuals. All stories need to follow the star format. The next thing, you also need to remember the reason why a lot of this reflection and writing stories or creating a bank of stories in the star format is important is because it speaks to the third point, which is show, don't tell. You need to have a bank of life examples that illustrate your impact on the world around you. It isn't enough to only say that, I'm an empathetic leader, or to make an assertion in this manner, but to also demonstrate times when you actually have illustrated or you actually have exhibited those behaviors, where you've actually lived your values. So remember that all the work that you're doing right now is going to lead up to giving the school a very strong pitch that leans on your life experiences. Always remember that a lot of the professional stories or a lot of the articulation that you're doing, and I'm going to go back to what Preeti said about goals, right? Goals are at the at the center of your application. You need to reflect on and articulate your goals, write down your short-term goals, write down your long-term goals, and also think about your plan B. What happens if your primary direction does not go the way you intended to go? Writing and articulating your goals will also enable you to think about how you're connecting. So you can literally create your mind maps accordingly. You can start thinking about different moments of your life which have been central to these goals mattering to you, this plan B really having some deeper meaning for you, as well as it also will define what is it about a particular school that you want to research. Or you can even compare your research notes with the articulated goals to see where there are logical connections that you can see between how you want to plan your future and what resources at a school are going to enable you to do so. A lot of what we're saying right now is also developing your muscle, your muscle to write. Okay. I think the more you write as part of reflecting, the more you write as part of creating talking points, you will find that, the act of talking about what matters to you, whether it's a goal, whether it's a value system, becomes that much easier. It becomes more organic, and you are able to see logical connections between different parts of your life far more easily. Another piece that really defines a lot of this writing that you're going to do is to think about how you want to contribute. Writing about why you belong in business school is not only about talking of the value that you're going to derive from business school, but also about the value that you're going to add as a part of the community. So when you talk about star stories, when you talk about the reflection you want to do and the values that matter to you, start looking for alignment between that value system and those choices, and how you can add value to your peers. Whether it is a soft skill, whether it is a technical skill that you possess, there will always be ways for you to research and articulate what you can do when you are placed with peers who may not have the same exposure you do, who may not have the same skills that you do, and who might require additional assistance. Another piece that now that I've covered like the five main points is also to identify patterns. A lot of the work that you're doing, like I said, will fall into certain categories of what is important to you, how they define your goals, what has been important in your choices, and you'll start seeing the kinds of themes that are emerging through influential or through substantial life moments. So when you do a lot of this work, and I would always suggest, have an Excel sheet where you keep a bank of stories. Each story can be a separate spreadsheet, but do that work because it will make the putting together of an application much easier within a very short time frame. So with that, I think it's time to go to the next tip that we have, which is really around how you need to think about building your network. A lot of the work that you're doing right now, whether it is articulating goals or whether it is researching your school, a lot of that will hinge on the opinions that you solicit. Now, while it is very tempting to solicit multiple opinions, it can become a little confusing because you're trying to integrate the insights that you gain from each and every interaction. So I would say if you're starting now and you want to kind of close out your application by December, you need to think about very consciously really streamlining the connections that you're building and thinking about how it's going to impact your application and the time beyond. So the three key areas or the three key ways in which you can build an effective network is one, attending events. Now, the kind of events that you should be looking out for are, general information events, which will give you a sense of certain key elements that you need to know while you're building your application. The second would be special events, which could be organized by student-led clubs, which could be organized by specific, admissions focus initiatives, as well as, you just look for maybe alumni events. You could look at maybe events that are led by school ambassadors. A lot of these could be either large scale virtual ones, or more importantly, you might have events in the location where you are. Now, these might be, quick to fill up. Spots on these on in-person events could be quick to fill up. So keep Google alerts on. Put an alert out for the schools that you want to apply to, track them, keep a track of every event that happens. And these are really good opportunities for you to understand the tone of the admissions team. It's important to also gain insight. And in a lot of cases, some of the special group events, which could be club events or it could be alum led events, will also give you an insight into what the community values, as well as what are things that you can bring to the community. So the second, and I'm going to deepen that by saying that you also need to start thinking about not only attending events and being part of an audience, but also having one-on-one conversations with ambassadors and alumni. When you speak to ambassadors and alumni, you get a real-time picture of what it means to be a part of the community, where they will talk about resources, they will talk about initiatives that may not be a part of the website research that you've done. This will help you deep dive into the school and really look at what resonates with you, what resources really resonate with you or speak to you as a part of your research process. Ambassadors are typically found on the school website on designated pages. You should scroll through them and look at, ambassadors who have maybe pre-MBA work experience that aligns with yours. Maybe they have moved, if they are alums, they may have moved into roles where you foresee yourself moving, but it's important to understand why you are talking to the person that you choose to connect with. A lot of the times when you speak to ambassadors, it is important for you to think about the questions that you want to ask them, because it's not a good idea to go into these conversations unprepared. You may want to understand elements about their profiles. You may want to understand elements about what on the school, what of the school experience has really proved transformational for them. You also want to talk a little bit about your own goals and get their opinion on school resources that would be of importance to you. Having a list of questions would mean that you're able to have a more directed conversation and make the most use of the time that they are investing in the conversation with you. It is important to also remember that you need to think about ways in which you can create or have a very engaged conversation that will enable a lot of these ambassadors to really be invested in your application and become your cheerleaders at the end of the day. It's also important to think about how you can deepen connections in every conversation, because they may have other individuals or references that you might benefit from speaking to. They may have other connections that they may refer you to. And a lot of that would hinge on your ability to come across as someone who has a goal, who has a plan, and who really wants to understand and demonstrates a genuine interest in the school that you are thinking about, that they have belonged to. Because remember, ambassadors and alumni are really invested in the school. They're passionate advocates for the school. So you should look at, really reflecting your own enthusiasm through those conversations. Preeti, anything you want to add to this conversation?
Yes, I think you've covered I think a lot of this, but I think the only thing I will add is that just document your research.
Yes.
As you're building this network, just document. I think that's you end up attending these events, talking to school ambassadors, alumni, current students, even faculty for that matter. Do not when you are mentioning so in these essays, people just mention this list of courses. No one thinks that what, maybe I can write to a faculty. I can either compliment a faculty that I just attended a podcast that you did and I found this very insightful, and I do feel that if I study under your tutelage at your this business school, it will be great. These things do play a role. There's a good chance the faculty will forward that email to the admissions office and they will mention, they will put it on your file. These things go, don't take these things lightly. The recruiting process is not just you submitting an application and someone looking at it in 7 to 8 minutes and put it in a admit file or a deny file. It starts months in advance, so don't take this very lightly. So talk to faculty also as you're researching courses. There was one of our clients, I will tell you, one applicant. He was interested in the value investing program at Columbia Business School, and he had completed 60% of the pre-read which is required for value investing at CBS through multiple podcasts and books which are written by the faculty who conduct those lessons. That that is demonstration of interest. So rather than just rambling a list of, I think, list of just classes and these are the courses I want to take and these are the professors I want. Everyone writes about that. How are you different, right? So please write, about things that you follow your curiosity during the process, and please document all of that research, so that you are also able to kind of spot patterns. And when patterns start to emerge in your research, you are able to also connect those patterns back to your own personal values and personal and professional stories, and then you can demonstrate a fit. Right, at the end of the day, we all as smart future business leaders know that at the end of the day you need and data and information, right, to predict future will look like. And this is how in you can put a strong MBA application together by connecting these dots and threads across your own life and from the information that you get from all these different sources.
I think another piece that I want to add on to this is also remember that as you're building your network, you're also building a network not only to understand what it means to be a part of the community, but you're also building a valuable set of people who are invested in your success. They're having conversations with you not just because it's their job. It's also because they believe in the school, but they also want to believe in your candidature. So it's important to understand not that that you need to ensure that these interactions get the respect that they deserve. If someone's investing time to speak with you, send them a follow-up note. Keep them informed about whether you apply to the school, if you've heard back from the school, because trust me, you will find that these are very natural and organic ways to have a set of individuals who are rooting for you, not only at the point of your application, but throughout your journey. And a lot of the individuals that we work with find a lot of enduring value through these conversations. So make the time to say thank you. It is something that, is never going to go lead you astray. Preeti, I'll move on, I think, to the next slide.
Okay, just give me a second. Um, all right. Um, so recognizing potential roadblocks, right? Now we are about 2.5 months away from deadlines. I would give it, another week, if deadlines, if you're, the schools that you're applying to start maybe, Jan 6th, 5th, 6th or whatever, right? Um, One is time commitment. Uh, of course, there will be work schedules that you have to work around with. And if you, like I said, if you haven't taken the standardized test score and you are like, dividing your time amongst, test preparation, application work, and your work, your office, then of course, you're juggling multiple balls in the air. Um, so plan ahead of time, right? What we believe at the Red Pen when we are working with applicants is the planning is very customized to every individual. Many a times people ask us, "Oh, do you have a schedule that you can give us?" Sure, we can put schedules together. A lot of us are business folk, and we are very attuned to kind of putting great charts and these project timelines and everything together. But will that work for you? Right, you have to make it work around your schedule. Some people are like, I'm like an early bird, and some people are like, I'm like a night owl, and stuff like that. So I think the schedules have to be worked around based on how you work best, and when do you have time for reflection. Make the most of the time that you have on weekends, right? So plan, I would say, during the week, plan how you will spend your weekend on application work. Don't have, wake up on Saturday morning and say, okay, now what do I do, right? So I think, and also identifying these multiple application components and saying that, what, let me spend 4 hours just understanding the application forms, right? 4 hours just looking at the school list. So break up your time into like chunks, accomplish one thing, don't just have everything unfinished. Um, Also, one more thing I would like to speak about time commitment is that, I don't know whether you're working with consultants or not working with consultants. Majority of applicants I have come across always pick up application work towards the end. Okay, it puts a lot of stress on the system, and then everyone is scrambling around to kind of just call friends, family, put pressure on the consultant that they're working with, and it's not a nice space to be in. Now, when we work with applicants, we are available, right? I mean, whichever applicant whichever consulting firm, sorry, you pay to, whether it's by the package or by the hour, they're available. This is our job. So I think you definitely need to be respectful of your own time, and the time of someone else who's helping you out, and do little bit every day. It's that compounding thing. Many of you are who are from the finance background, hopefully know what I'm talking about. But it's that little bit compounding. It's a consistency of doing something every single day that will eventually add up to those efforts. It's not like, one fine day I wake up, 15 hours I will just do everything. Like I said, you do the pre-work. Putting pen to paper is not easy. um, Second is inadequate school research. Along with inadequate school research, finalizing your list of schools to apply, that goes hand in hand. Um, People can, it's like the Goldilocks theory. People will aim either too high, right? Like, I go to an M7, or there is no future, for me as far as MBA is concerned, or it's like I aiming too low. Like, I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think I stand a chance. I don't think, I should apply. If you don't apply, you will never know. So you need to find that balance, that Goldilocks, not too cold, not too hot, right? I mean, you have to find that balance where you, which are the pool of schools. And here I think, working with any consultant, not just the Red Pen, but I think any established consultant will definitely be very useful for you. So put that school research list together, write down your notes, try to corroborate those notes. Also, try to, when you're researching schools, look for finer points. Every school will give you community. Every school will have, basic courses. People write about, I will develop my leadership skills at a school. Sure, Columbia can give you that, so will MIT, so will HBS, so will Ross, so will Darden. How are they different? Right? And this is a question you have to ask yourself first before answering. This will also help you later on when you are invited to interviews. Okay. Again, interview prep doesn't, at least at the red pen, it doesn't start only after you get the interview invite. It starts during application. When you reflect on these points, you will perform better at those interviews as well. Low test scores. If you are not a good standardized test taker, please be mindful of this and get the test out of the way as soon as possible. Okay. Last is, I think, the recommenders. I think I already mentioned that in the first slide. There are quite a few questions on LOR, so we are going to take them.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So don't worry, guys. But recommenders, I think, first understand who are your recommenders, who are you going to, and start having those conversations. You cannot many a times, and this is I'm not really doing this. Many a times, people recommenders will be like, just write something and give it to me. Mind you, if you're the person writing the essays and you're the person writing the recommender, admissions officers are very smart. These are people who have 15, 16, 20 years of reading applications, experience of reading applications. Uh, don't think you can fool them. We look at documents and we are able to say that, what, oh, this has been written by the same person. It's not that they do not understand um, the problem over here, because most recommenders do exactly what most recommenders do, right? I mean, just can you just write this for me? But be thoughtful in terms of how you help craft those recommendations. Have conversations with your recommender. That these are the stories that I would like to. Should we speak about this or not about this? So start having those conversations earlier. So these are, I think, the most roadblocks that we have seen. Um,
I'll just add a little bit to that.
yeah,
Yeah. So, another thing that you need to remember is the recommendation letter is one element of your profile that you are never going to be in control of in terms of, having access to it or, having any kind of influence over the person who's going to write it. So you need to understand that when you are approaching a recommender, you need to be sensitive to the fact that they may not be available closer to your deadline. They may not, you need to kind of work around their schedule so that they can spend an optimal amount of time giving the consideration that your recommendation requires. So at this point in time, if you have identified your recommenders, make the time to have conversations with them, not only about the recommendation points, but more importantly around their availability and their, ensuring that they have, the comfort of liberty of time to sit and write out their recommendation for you. So do not expect to approach them, in the middle of December and say, hey, you know what, can you write this for me? Or can you give me a recommendation by the end of December? It's really
correct.
about ensuring that that relationship gets the respect that it deserves and that document gets the respect that it deserves. Another piece that I also want to talk about is, Preeti spoke in detail about time commitment. And I think one of the things that I'd like to talk about is if you are someone who's very tempted to keep things for the weekend because that's when you have like a chunk of time, remember that between today and when you're actually going to be expected to have your letter together, you literally have only about 10 weekends that you can devote to it. And that's putting a lot of pressure on yourself at a time when you need to really be consistent in working on stuff. So my recommendation would be that, identify maybe in a week about 2 or 3 days where you can devote at least an hour's worth of time to doing one element of your application. We've given you a lot of focus areas that you can look at. It's a good idea to have those focus areas listed out somewhere so that in a week you say that, okay, you know what, I'm going to spend an hour making like an outline of a recommendation pointers that I'd want to talk to my recommender about. Or you can make the outline for some professional stories that have been on your mind. But doing that also gives you a lot of flexibility because, say, I planned for Monday, but Monday 10 was like a very hectic day at work. I still have the liberty of saying I had allocated 3 hours this week. I'll maybe work that around and figure out another day when it's possible. But consistency is key. Consistency is key to any part of your application. A lot of the times, a lot of inadequate school research or connections can result from the fact that you just might find yourself overwhelmed and trying to do multiple things at once. So consistency will also ensure that some of the roadblocks that are mentioned on the sheet tend to then get taken care of because you're planning ahead of time. So I think that's the only part that I wanted to add it over here. Preeti, you want to talk about our last minute application checks? Before we do that, I will mention please add your questions to the box, to the comments box, because we will pick them up after the slide.
Great. So I think this is, just you can screenshot the slide. This is basically just, going back to the basics that, please check your resume. There are, innumerable errors in the resume, periods at the end of some bullet points, no, not other bullet points, something is in italics, something is not in italics, something it is bold, not bold, spelling errors. Please use Grammarly. And now we have these AI tools. Just run, at least don't use AI to write your essays, please. I think that is one thing. I think because this was like last minute kind of tips kind of thing. But some schools are very sensitive about it. And so don't just be like AI is going to solve all my problems. If they have like 5 essays that read exactly like produced by the chat GPT bot, then that's not going to really help your candidature really, right? But use Grammarly, something like Grammarly, for at least grammar checks, spelling errors. Proofread your content, have someone else also kind of just read through it. And just an additional set of eyes. If you've been looking at something over and over again, an additional set of eyes always helps. Consistency in numbers, we always see this. There'll be a project on which a certain impact is mentioned on the resume, whereas the essay mentions something else. Application forms mention something. So please check. Okay, there might be, if it's like this, when the admissions officer picks up your application, let's assume everything goes well and they decide to proceed further with your candidature. They will look at everything. The first glance may be just a couple of minutes to kind of get a sense check. Okay, who, what is the strength of this applicant's candidature. Great. Now we put them in this pile of proceed to the interview stage. If they are admitting you to the business school, they will check everything. One more thing I think we did not touch upon, and this is something we do at the Red Pen, is review your LinkedIn profiles and help you with your LinkedIn profiles as well. We do that. So look at, and I think I don't know if we are definitely one of the early ones who started doing it. While it is not a requirement, people will go online and they will check. Like I said, if they're admitting you to business school, they will look at you, online. Can we go back to the previous slide? Yeah, so I think we they will look at that. So I think do look at your LinkedIn profile and just clean that up as well. Make sure there's consistency across your online presence and what you've written in your application, and use the optional essay sparingly. Don't be like, for European schools, optional essay is not really optional, so you must utilize that. They give you as much real estate as possible, but in if for US schools, they say that give us information that is truly going to make a difference in decision making. Do not introduce bias in the application in any way, so just be very cognizant of that as well. um, all
I
right.
think it's an
Yes,
important
saying
issue.
thank you, I think, is very important. So I think it's whenever anyone who's helped you in that journey, from the schools that you're applying to, please, especially school ambassadors, admissions officers, please write to them and tell them that thanking them for the effort and the information that they shared with you. It will really go a long way. Yeah, Natasha, sorry, you were saying something.
No, I was just going to add to 2 points that you mentioned. One is that also remember that your LinkedIn profile, having an updated LinkedIn profile, will mean that if you're forming connections or you send an invitation to someone to connect because you want to talk about your application, they will also look at your LinkedIn profile. So, your LinkedIn profile is not only important at the point of submitting your application, but you should also consider updating it so that someone who's deciding whether they want to invest the time to have a conversation with you is able to look at your LinkedIn profile and understand that you are someone who's really serious about their growth and their personal journey as well as their professional journey. So make the effort. You don't need to update everything on your LinkedIn profile at once, but you need to be mindful that it is going to be an expression of who you are, which will determine how many people you're able to become engaged with, or people who can become invested in you. So look at your LinkedIn profile as also an investment of your time before someone even sees your resume. The last piece, which I also wanted to talk about, is when we talk about using additional space that schools provide. And again, there is a difference between the way US schools would look at that space and European schools. But it's very important to realize that you need to create unique content which addresses that particular prompt. Sometimes you may be very happy with an application that you've written for one school and a really unique essay prompt, and you can be tempted to say, you know what, I do have the space on another application. And I think this essay that I've written for X school really says something meaningful about me. So let me copy paste that content onto the additional information section. That is something that is an absolute no. Please do not use content from one application to for another, because schools can make out that this is content that would be part of another school's essay prompt. So use the additional space wisely. If it is a US school which asks you to only use it to explain some unique circumstances or some mitigating circumstances that you want to talk about, or if it's a European school which is asking you to use that space to talk about something meaningful to you, ensure that the content you develop for that particular prompt is not something that is recycled from other applications. So, and I think with that, let's move on to the questions. So you can keep those coming. Before we go to questions, I just want to mention that there is a QR code over here, and you can scan this QR code to book an appointment to speak with us. And I would strongly encourage you to do so, because I think if you're planning to apply in round two, now is really the time when you want to think about finalizing someone to help you with your application. And we are running a lot of unique discounts and offers until the end of October. So I would say that if you're on this particular webinar and you're thinking about putting in an application in round two, scan this particular QR code and reach out to us. So with that, I think, Preeti, let's look at the questions that we have coming in. um, a lot of them are to do with LORs, but there are, I think, a lot of broader questions as well. So
Yeah,
as we,
lots of LOR questions.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So there are a couple of questions around timing to apply for external scholarships and volunteer work. So Preeti, do you want to take the scholarship question first? Because then we'll club together some of the LOR questions.
Should I take the questions?
Yes, the external scholarship question.
External scholarship, when is the right time to apply for external scholarships? So I think external scholarships, one, I think are very few, for MBA applications. For postgraduate applications overall, perhaps there are a few more, scholarships available. But for external, just make a list, and the deadlines are given, based on each of the, scholarships that they have. So I think we used to maintain a list, for some of the external scholarships, but I think it's a bit outdated, and some of them are not even in effect now. So right time to apply is, check the deadlines. And there are school based scholarships also. So if you are a stellar applicant, and if you're applying to a school, which is why it's important to apply to dream, target, and safety schools, so that you can get scholarships, if your candidature is slightly above average for the incoming class, right? So you get that scholarship together with your application. The other way is that you first get your admit and then work with the financial aid office of the respective business school, and then you'll get your, they will have some options. Sometimes, if people are pursuing careers in social impact, then there is the financial aid office, helps with some of the funding and stuff like that. So I think it depends on the institution. Follow-up question: the volunteer job that we take up should be aligned with our post MBA goals. Volunteer job, I assume you
So
mean
the
the
volunteer
community
work or the
citizenship,
extracurriculars.
the community work that you're basically doing, not
Yeah, yeah,
extracurriculars,
yeah.
the community work that
And
you're
the
doing.
additionals. Yeah.
Yeah. The community work need not be really aligned with your post MBA goals. No, I mean, for example, let's say you want to take up a career in, as a product manager in any tech. health tech, agri tech, fintech, whatever. That doesn't mean you need to kind of teach coding skills to students in in an NGO. No, it's no, it's not that. If you do happen to like it and you do it, that's fine. But you may be passionate about providing shelter for stray animals. uh, do whatever you do consistently, because schools are looking for quality over quantity. They've said this time and again.
I think the additional work that you do, or the volunteer work that you do, or anything that you do that indulges a personal passion, is also a great way to show schools that you have interests outside of work, that you put your money where your mouth is. So, it's not only about asserting who you are at work, but it's also about giving an additional dimension as to what makes you you. If you're passionate about a cause, or if, and it doesn't necessarily need to be something that is common to a lot of applicants. You can be passionate about something that is very unique to you as well. And the good thing is, when you talk about it in an appropriate way on your resume, it can really show them how you follow your beliefs, you put your beliefs into action, and how you engage with communities that may not necessarily be a part of the individuals that you deal with on a day to day basis. So there are various ways to look at it, and just look at giving them additional data points that talk about who you are. That should be the focus.
Right.
Um, we have a lot of LOR questions, so Preeti, I think maybe we can look at all of them together. So I
Yeah.
think the first question is, how many recommenders do we need to write an LOR? And I would say it depends on the school and the program that you're applying to. Typically, you need to have at least one recommender. There are some schools that will ask you for two, and you need to check application requirements. And in case you are applying for a
Letter of
joint,
recommendation. Some schools require, two. Um, Sorry,
sorry,
Natasha. I
Preeti,
think we
I
just
think there
lost you
was
a
a
bit.
bit of a lag. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I thought you left, so I think I started talking.
no, no, no. So
I
I
think
think
how
we were
many
essentially
recommenders
saying,
basically depends on the number of based on the school, right?
yeah, so it would be one or two. But remember that if you're applying to certain joint programs, they may ask you for a third letter of recommendation, which would indicate your ability to, to work within certain technical environments. So keep in mind that, you need to check requirements if it's for purely an MBA or if it's for a joint degree. The need may be for a maximum of two, or a third one if you're applying for a joint degree program. So that's as far as number of recommenders is concerned. I think, Preeti, there's another question in terms of, can't reach out to my immediate supervisor. Who else can I consider reaching out to? Now, there could be various reasons why. It could be that you've not told anyone that you're applying for an MBA, and that might be awkward. In which case, you can think of like a previous manager. You don't necessarily need to give the current manager that you're working with. If you can't, if your current manager may not agree to give it to you, then you need to think about individuals who would have a view of your performance, who would be able to speak to the way in which you achieve your goals, and could give some perspective on you versus the cohort of peers that you are working with. So a previous supervisor is a good idea. If your immediate manager is not the person that you want to approach, and you have a second level supervisor who can also have a perspective on your performance, that's another way to go through it. But I think, avoid using a recommender who may be very senior in the organization that you're a part of, but will have very little view about the work that you're doing. So, Preeti, I think another piece that we can address is, I think someone's asked, can we have one of our colleagues write an LOR for us? Um, I would always recommend that you do it with someone who has a more objective view of your performance. Having a colleague write a letter of recommendation may not necessarily be an objective or an unbiased view.
Yeah.
And I would always give first preference to someone who you have either a reporting relationship with, if you are part of a conventional organization. If you're part of a family business, you may want to look at individuals within the system that you report to, or maybe clients. But I would avoid having a colleague who may be in the same team or even in a cross functional team write a recommendation, especially if they are part of the same, appraisal cohort or performance, competing for the same performance resources. So that's my take on that. Preeti, there's a question around gaps in experience. So I think we have one question which says, "I quit my job in August to focus on my mental health and MBA application. How can I talk about this on an application? Is it good or bad?"
Uh, so there is, see, they admissions officers realize that they are dealing with human beings, so they are, they make concessions for these things. But you have to also if you are able to explain the context,
Yes.
they will look at everything very holistically. They will look at, what has your work experience been, how are you, have you been as an undergrad student, what are your post MBA goals, what are the other things that you bring to the community. Why is it that you took a break, quit your job in August just to focus on your mental health and MBA application? Why typically quitting your job to focus on MBA applications is not something which is looked upon very favorably. And why is the reason for that? The reason for that is when you are at business school, you will be drinking from a fire hose, right? You will be pulled in all different directions between building your career, networking. You are completely stretched thin. You have to prepare for these case studies, in the morning. Like, I think I was podcast the other day, and someone was talking about their experience at Harvard Business School and said that, what, we had this case study method, and the expectation was that you're supposed to read the case study before you come to class, but many of us had not even read the case studies. So, that, just catching up on all of that is just such an intense experience, that you want to, be able to demonstrate that, you can withstand that pressure, that business school pressure. But that being said, there are always exceptions, right? If you're in a job which is just completely like, you're clocking like some 20-hour days, 100-hour weeks, like back to back to back to back, then yes, then maybe, your work profile just speaks, a lot for itself, and then just taking that break in the last month of August may not matter. The other thing why this also is important is, let's assume, you just took a break in August, and September you put your applications, October you get an interview, and by December they tell you that, oh, you're coming to business school. What business school is also concerned about is, will you then have a job from after you get an admission to
Yeah.
business school up until the time that you land up on campus? Because if no, if that break lasts right until the time you go to campus, you will have trouble getting internships. Internships, recruiters come to campus. You'll start in August, so fall, and recruiters come to campus as early as October for recruitment for summer internships for the following summer. So it is. So if they may think that, what is, if this gap, 1 month gap on your resume turns out to be like a 1 year gap, how will recruiters view this? I would, address that on an upfront basis, that I'm taking this gap for this period, and during this time, I'm working on this, I'm working on a side project, I'm working on something. So I would try to maybe, proactively address that aspect, if that makes sense.
I think I'm going to. There are a couple of questions, Preeti, but we are running out of time, so I'm just going to be
We are
very
running
high.
out of time, so I think we can, yeah, we can. I think
Maybe
this
look at
is,
one or two odd.
yeah.
One also. Yeah. So I think one question that I do want to address is that if you don't have any leadership experience, how can we compensate for that? I think demonstrate depth of experience. Talk about times when you've mentored individuals. Talk about times when you have been a part of cross-functional teams, which are also very complex, human interactions. Schools do understand that not everyone is in a formal leadership role, but I think you need to reflect on times when you've actually been placed in a position of responsibility, whether formally or informally, or even if it is a project-based assignment. So that's that. Any specific certifications which can improve our profile? What will add value to your profile is either if you do a certification which will help demonstrate to schools that you have the quantitative chops to keep up with the academic rigor of a program. So look at short-term courses which might, just strengthen your exposure to certain quantitative concepts. So if you have like a month or two left and you can only do a short course, then those are the courses that I would spend my time on. And lastly, I think someone has asked a question saying that, schools might look for 16 years of formal education as a prerequisite. I have 15 years. Will that be an issue? And honestly, Mridula, there is no clear answer to that, because I think while a lot of schools will recognize that for international applicants, they may not have a 16-year undergrad, a lot of these are things that you need to check with schools on a case by case basis. Look at the FAQ sections of individual schools. We have worked with individuals who have a 15-year undergrad, but you need to really be very mindful and interact with admissions teams or check FAQ sections of the school's admissions website so that you can take that call. And with that, I think, Preeti, we come to the end of this particular session. And if you want to speak with us, because I do see there are a lot of questions that we'd be really interested to speak with you about, do scan the book an appointment link, reach out to us. We will be happy to speak with you. And yeah, I think I'd like to wish everyone the best for round two. If you're looking at applying this year, I hope the tips have been very helpful for you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. See you.